In it 10, Shazam's admission. During a crossover between DC's beloved Batman and Shazam, Billy ends up trying to help Batman stop Scarecrow, but does something reckless in the process, resulting in Batman reaming him out for it, saying, quote, "Scarecrow is one of the most dangerous people on the planet. If he'd released that toxin into the airstream, all of Gotham would have been," but gets cut off by Billy in one of the most tear-jerking admissions in comics. Quote, "I know. Shazam! I'm sorry, okay? I'm just a kid. I don't know what to do. I never know what to do. I have all this power and most of the time I'm just messing up or punching crocodiles or something. I feel like I'm wasting it, like I was never supposed to have it, but I don't know. I do have it. So I just want to help. I need to help." Honestly, it was a very emotional scene. I don't know if Batman knew about Billy being a kid before this or not, but you can just sense how guilty Billy feels about everything. He's just a kid that wants to help. And at 9, Jason Todd. Jason Todd died by voters calling in to decide whether he would live or die, and his death was tragic for many reasons. Not only did most deem the vote unfair and cynical, but felt like it was a little too dark. However, for many, Jason had never been more interesting than he was right before he died, and it was his death that caused an increased sense of actually having a good character that eventually made him popular enough to come back. Jason would most likely not be as loved as he is today if he hadn't have died, because his death is like one of the biggest moments in DC history, and outside of that, it made him the character he is today. The iconic images of Batman holding his impressively intact corpse are one that have gone down in comic history, and he was also seemingly the first person to stay dead in comics and really set the stage for actual stakes now that characters wouldn't come back. He eventually did, but it was still an emotional death to read and something that I would hate to go through. And at 8, Flashpoint's ending. Flashpoint, a timeline of Barry Allen's own creation where his mother doesn't die and he thus doesn't become the Flash. Oh, and don't forget the fact that Aquaman and Wonder Woman are at war. And at the very least in the animated movie, this resulted in them destroying the world, literally destroying the planet. Barry has to run back in time to stop himself from saving his mother, letting her die just so that he can save the planet. But in this case, Flash literally outruns the destruction of a planet and does so in order to let his mom die. Like, holy crap, that's insane. Like, I don't know if I'd have the actual strength to do that. So to me, it's pretty ridiculous that Barry first, while in emotional turmoil, is able to outrun the destruction of the world, that's fast, and then has to sacrifice his mother. Both emotionally and physically surviving this is damn impressive. Like, he should have either exploded with the rest of the world or not have been strong enough to sacrifice his mother. I wouldn't have been able to do it. Either way, she dies, right? So like, my thought is like, at least keep your dad out of prison and give him like another decade or so, right? Damn, that was painful. And at 7, the death of Barry Allen. After being put on trial for killing Professor Zoom, Barry Allen retires and joins Iris in the 30th century. After only a few weeks of happiness though, the crisis on Infinite Earths intervenes, and Allen is captured by the Anti-Monitor and brought to 1985. According to the Anti-Monitor, the Flash was the only being capable of traveling to other universes at will, so he had to capture him so that he couldn't be free. Allen escapes and foils the Anti-Monitor's plan though to destroy the Earth with an antimatter cannon, creating a speed vortex to draw the power in, but he dies in the process as the power becomes too much for his body. It has been said that Allen travels back through time and becomes the very same lightning bolt that gave him his powers, but later it was also strongly implied that the soul of Barry Allen resides in the Speed Force, the mystical source of Valhalla open to all dead speedsters, and the place from which the living ones draw their powers. After Allen's death, Kid Flash Wally West, his nephew and sidekick, ends up taking up the mantle of the Flash. A heartbreaking moment for any longtime fans of Barry Allen who now had to accept a new character in the role. And at 6, Catwoman and Helena. With the 82-issue run that is the 2002 to 2008 Catwoman monthly series, Selina Kyle was dragged through the mud. After killing Black Mask in cold blood, after discovering that Zatanna had mind-wiped her in order to set her on the right path, Selina wound up with a baby when DC's titles jumped forward 1 year in time following Infinite Crisis. She had given up on the Catwoman mantle and decided to go legit when her secret identity is revealed, and Selina realizes that it would be impossible to raise a daughter in that environment. Enlisting the aid of Batman, she fakes the deaths of herself and the baby and places the child up for adoption. The real gut-wrencher comes when she turns to Zatanna and begs her to mind-wipe her again to erase all the memories of her daughter, to which Zatanna refuses. Selina is one of the most grounded, independently sufficient characters in modern comics, comics, and to see her break down like that was absolutely brutal. Having to give up a child is never easy. Halfway through into number 5, Ripped Letter. During the events of Flashpoint, both in the comics and in the animated movie The Flashpoint Paradox, Barry brings back a little souvenir for Batman. But instead of a "I survived my trip to a different timeline" t-shirt, it's actually a letter from Bruce's father, who was alive in the Flashpoint timeline. It's the only contact that Batman has ever had with one of his parents since they died. It would be a shame if something happened to it. Oh wait, that's right, Thawne decides to rip it to shreds so that it couldn't even be reassembled. It also didn't help that Thomas was the reason Thawne was killed in the Flashpoint timeline, so yeah, this was certainly a way to get back at Thomas, even though he was dead this time around. But I mean, like, who cares? It was super unnecessary for Reverse Flash to do this, but it was still quite an emotional moment for both Bruce and the readers, which is also confusing since in the Dark Multiverse story, Reverse Flash actually saves both Bruce Wayne and his parents in order for there to be no Batman to oppose him in Reverse Flash's perfect universe. But this seems like another good way to stick it to Batman, who can never really be happy. In at 4, Clark Says Goodbye. As if the cover alone wasn't a dead giveaway that All-Star Superman number 6 would hold some truly teary-eyed scenes, Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely bombarded readers with emotion through one of the most potent stories in Superman's history. The last few pages of the issue sees a younger Clark speaking at Jonathan Kent's funeral, where he is witnessed unknowingly by his future self. The teardrops come once Ma and Clark are back on the farm, and young Clark is questioning the point of his powers if he couldn't save his dad. Of all the times that Jonathan Kent has died in the comics, or even in film for that matter, All-Star Superman number 7 nails it right on the head in terms of genuine emotion. Morrison serves us the best incarnation of the Man of Steel. Unrelentingly human. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, Ralph finds Sue's body. I think that in general, Identity Crisis number 1 may be the saddest DC comic ever. There is not one moment of joy within these pages, but when Ralph Dibny, the elongated man, found his wife and soulmate Sue Dearborn dead in their home, burnt to a crisp, you're a soulless bastard if you didn't wipe a tear from your eye. Firstly, seeing Ralph's rubbery mouth drop open because he's too emotional to literally keep himself together while kneeling desperately in the rain clutching Sue's body is a great image of itself, but ow. And then right next to that panel, there's a close-up of a positive pregnancy test and a note that says, "Daddy, 2 lines equals positive." That's cruel. Identity Crisis is definitely the saddest comic event ever, but this moment takes the cake for the most depressing moment in the history of all the Crisis events. As a person who loves love and thinks that it's one of the best things in the world when you have it, this is literally my worst fear. I would have hated to be in Ralph's shoes in these moments. Like, I can get behind like stretching myself at will, that seems like it would be fun, but having to deal with this, no thank you. Penultimately, in at number 2, Aqua Baby. In quite possibly the most messed up death in DC Comics history, we meet Arthur Curry Jr., aka Aqua Baby. Trust me, I wish I was kidding. Up until 1977, the notion of straight up killing anyone off for real in comics was a rare notion. But Adventure Comics number 452 changed that idea entirely. Black Manta kidnaps Aqua Baby and places him in a chamber that slowly fills with air, suffocating him slowly over time. Because you know he's Aqua Baby, not a normal baby, so instead of water it fills with air, yeah. Manta forces Aquaman and Aqualad to fight each other to save Junior's life, but by the time they're done, it's too late. When the fight ends, Aquaman's son is dead, Aquaman and Aqualad's relationship is ruined, and Mira now mourns her infant son. This event actually ends up leading to the divorce of Aquaman and Mira, which, given who played her in the Aquaman movies, I feel like he dodged a bullet there. But again, like I said, love. And the love you have for your own child is incredible unless you're a monster. So being unable to save your son would be an absolute atrocity in my mind. Like, I wouldn't be able to deal with that. That's no. And finally, in at number 1, Blackest Night. With Jeff Johns at the helm, the lore of the Green Lantern Corps in 2000 grew exponentially, introducing the emotional spectrum of light and 6 other Lantern Corps that were established across the universe. All of this was in preparation for one of the most emotionally charged events in the DC Universe's history, Blackest Night. Without going too deep into things, a creature called Necron reanimates the dead, humans and superheroes alike, and tries to eliminate all life from the universe. It's creepy, right? But here's where it gets really messed up. Any character that was brought back to life is also subject to Necron's control. To give you an idea, Superman, Green Arrow, Wonder Woman, Superboy, and Bart Allen are all brought back and under Necron's control, who, at this point, is manipulating Batman and vomiting Black Lantern rings. Watching heroes fight against their friends is hard enough, but when readers realized the majority of the core Justice League and Titans just became zombies, this became an instant page-turner, and would surely be difficult for anyone in that situation. Like, yeah, they're zombies, but in a world with zombies and a man who can travel through time and other realities at will, you'd think that there'd be a way to stop them from being zombies and back to being normal humans and alive. So you wouldn't want to put them down again, but you kinda have to. It's a turmoil for sure.
Number 10. Emma Frost learns her Hellions' fate. During the time when Emma Frost led the Hellions, many of them ultimately ended up dead when caught in a battle with Trevor Fitzroy and his Sentinels. Emma herself ended up in a psychic coma, and issues later in issue 311 of X-Men, when she awoke, she ended up swapping bodies with Iceman. So it's important to note that for pretty much all of this story arc, she does look like Iceman because she's in his body, so don't let that confuse you. Emma struggled with the revelation that the Hellions had been killed while in her care. Anytime Emma faces losing a student or child in her charge, it's pretty much the most sad in comics. Emma may be a lot of things, sometimes a hero, sometimes a villain, but the fact remains that she is a great teacher who very much cares for the children she looks after and trains. Number 9. Spider-Man Reign. Pretty much this entire limited series is depressing. I don't think I actually cried when reading it, but I definitely was severely bummed out by it. And if you haven't read it, be prepared to get bummed if you do. In Spider-Man Reign, we get to see a much older and much more senile Peter Parker. This version of him has less hope and is now retired from being Spider-Man. He works as a florist and struggles even to get that right, and he's lost MJ. And he kind of lost MJ as a result of his own involvement with her. I'm not gonna get into it because I don't think I can even say it on YouTube, but basically he's the reason that MJ died. Even when he tries to resurface to save the city from re-emerging villains and the police state that it has become, he struggles and gets his butt whooped a lot. And I mean a lot. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are enjoying this super sad list, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. The Origin of Somnus. This one is sad in kind of like a happy way. It's like, it just pulls on your heartstrings. In the Marvel Voices Pride issue, we got maybe one of the sweetest Akihiro aka Daken stories ever. Akihiro decides that there is someone who passed away recently, a mutant, who deserves a second shot at life in Krakoa, a second chance to truly be seen and be happy. That is Carl Valentino. Carl's mutant power allows him to control dreams, an oneromancer, meaning that Carl and Daken's one night stand actually felt like a lifetime to Akihiro, a lifetime they spent together, and in the dream they were happy. It was a dream that Akihiro says he never knew he wanted, but it was too much for him inevitably at the time, so he ran. Carl lived out his life while Daken raged on for decades. Because of the period that Carl grew up in, he was unable to really reveal his true self, or to feel like he could reveal his true self to those around him, to let them know that he was gay. So while his life was happy, Akihiro felt Carl had never really gotten a chance to live truthfully as the person that he actually was. Because of this, Daken has him resurrected on Krakoa and is actually there when he wakes up, excited to let Valentino know that he has a second chance. Proud that he can finally be who he always wanted to be, who he always was, Carl takes the mutant name Somnus. Number 7. The Punisher finishes the job. Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe has to be up there for one of the saddest endings to a comic of all time. In this comic, Punisher sets out to get revenge on all superheroes after his family is killed as part of collateral damage in a superhero battle. He fights and kills everyone within the Marvel Universe until it's down to just him and Daredevil. Daredevil holds back from killing his friend Frank Castle, hoping he can manage to talk him down, but eventually he's also killed by Frank. However, as he lays bleeding to death, Daredevil takes the opportunity to unmask, revealing his true identity to Frank, revealing himself to actually be his friend, Matt Murdock. He tells Frank of the importance of remembering that even superheroes have other lives, like he does, or did, saying that there's always someone under the mask, Frank, but you killed us all, with his dying breath, making Frank realize that in order to finish the job, he must also take out himself, as he too is a man hiding behind a less literal mask. Number 6. Death of Grills. Grills died in the David Aja and Matt Fraction Hawkeye series from 2012. If you don't know who Grills is, you'd really need to read the series to get attached and feel the feels of his death, but to give you a brief synopsis of why his death hurt so bad, Grills is Hawkeye's well-meaning neighbor and later tenant. And if you've watched the Disney Plus Hawkeye series, he's not a LARPer in this reality anyways. He lives in the same building as Hawkeye, aka Clint Barton, whom Grills always called Hawkeye. We get to know him as a friend of Clint's, whom he sometimes goes to for advice. He's kind, funny, and just an honest character. He also feels real, which is probably why it hurt so bad when he was killed by assassin and villain the Clown, who works for the Tracksuit Draculas, or did at the time in that series. Grills, no! Grills' death and the subsequent mourning of the character starts in issue number 10 and is felt onwards throughout Clint's narrative. Number 5. Death of Karen Page. I think Karen Page's death has to be one of the most tragic moments for Daredevil in the comics, and also for Karen, who, dies. It all went down in issue number 5 of the 1998 Daredevil series. Karen and Matt had both had a rough go, and were finally managing to get their lives back in order. Matt had just recovered from the Born Again story arc where Daredevil's secret identity as Matt Murdock is revealed to Kingpin, and his life ends up being destroyed by Fisk. Karen, on the other hand, had just recovered from a drug addiction and got over being falsely accused of murder, managing to break into the world of radio and become a talk show host. So it was really heartbreaking when during a fight with Bullseye, Karen intercepted one of Daredevil's billy clubs that was taken by Bullseye and used as a weapon to target Matt. The blow by the billy club impaled Karen through her chest. Her dying words were to Matt as he cradled her in his arms. "I'll miss you." Oh, so sad. Poor Karen. Number 4. Destruction of Genosha. Probably one of the greatest tragedies to happen in the comics, especially in regards to the mutants, which I'm quite fond of. During the E is for Extinction story arc in New X-Men issue 115, we saw Genosha decimated. This previous mutant island nation had a population of over 16 million mutants, but when Cassandra Nova unleashed her wild sentinels on the place, it was easily overwhelmed and completely destroyed. All the mutants pretty much ended up dead, and even with resurrection protocols in place on Krakoa now, it will take some time before we can ever get the numbers close to what it was and bring back all those fallen mutants that were lost, including children and, whole families who were wiped out. It's actually the destruction of Genosha that brought out Emma's secondary mutation, her diamond form, making her one of the tragic, pretty much lone survivors of that attack, which we learn in the following issue. Poor Emma, jeez. Emma has had a rough time in the comics. Top 10 saddest things that happened to Emma Frost. Number 3. Disbanding of the Hellions. The 2020 Hellions series was such an interesting book. I fell in love with the idea of it when it was first announced, and we learned who our team would be, and then even more so when it was released and I began to read it. I also love how when that book was announced, everyone was like, I think pass, that sounds weird. And I was like, yay, Nanny! Give me Nanny and Orphan Maker. It quickly became one of my favorite X books, and I fell in love with the characters and their relationships with one another. So you can imagine how hard it was when I finally read the ending to Hellions in issue 18, making me emotional just thinking about it. Especially as the team disbanded and almost everyone ended up with a somewhat depressing ending. But that's the thing with the Hellions team. They're all characters still trying to find their place, and just as they thought they had found it, it was taken from them. In a land that they have been told is one of opportunity, where there is a place for all of them. Each team member now finds themselves at the ending somewhat lost upon wrapping up this story. It made sense, it was well written and well drawn and well produced, but it still broke my heart. As with many well written comedic pieces, it also ended up being one of the most poignant endings in books I have ever read. Number 2. Death of Spider-Man. The death of Spider-Man in the Ultimate Spider-Man comic. This one may have not happened in the main continuity, but Ultimate Spider-Man would become such an influential comic that it would actually go on to inspire a lot of what we saw in the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man film trilogy. Peter Parker here dies when he is just a teenager while fighting to save the people he loves. During a final fight with Norman Osborn's Green Goblin, Spider-Man seemingly kills him by bashing him with a truck a few times, but unfortunately that vehicle rifle explodes. Having already been put through the ringer, this ends up being Spider-Man's final fatal injury and final moment, or so it would seem. Aunt May manages to rush to his side, with Peter just having enough time to tell her that he did it. He finally did it. While he might not have been able to save his Uncle Ben, this time he was at least able to save his Aunt May. Of course, it would be revealed later on that Peter managed to survive due to him basically being immortal, but at the time readers didn't know about that yet, so this death felt very final and very emotional. Number 1. Farewell from the X Factor team. One of the saddest moments for me reading comics recently was the ending of the most recent X Factor series. And although the actual ending of that comic series was also bittersweet and brought a tear to my eyes, brought a few tears to my eyes, the most heart-wrenching part actually came from after the comic was finished with the farewell letters. The last few pages of that comic feature farewell letters from artist David Baldion and writer Leah Williams, and both made me cry profusely. Baldion talked about how hard it was to say goodbye to this book and to these characters, even more so than other book endings, which of course are always challenging. These were very much our kids, he writes. It very much felt like we were holding their hands during a journey of recovery, of acceptance, of rebirth. It's always hard. It was harder this time. And not only because we went deep with them, we could feel this story meant a lot to a lot of people out there. I'm going to miss my X Factor kids so much. I've come to know them so well that it honestly feels like some family member has left and is not around anymore. In saying her farewell, Williams shared what she felt the book and the whole world of Krakoa meant to the audience. Something became very clear to us all during the pandemic. The fact that as X-writers, we were helping by giving readers a safe place to escape to in the form of Krakoa. That became my greatest wish in writing X Factor during the pandemic and all the turmoil of the past year. I wanted to give you all a safe place to retreat. I wanted you all to feel welcome in Krakoa and know that you belong here. She continues, I wanted you to feel the community and camaraderie that I feel with my peers, and know that without a doubt, you belong. I wanted to keep the gates open for you as long as I could. And I think that made me so emotional because for me, that's what the X-Men is all about. It's like you don't belong, but like finding a home and a family where you feel like you belong. It's like everyone that doesn't belong finding that place where they can be safe. And so just that revelation of that being what the comic was about broke my heart. Oh, so good.
Number 10. Evil Twin. In Deadpool 2, we see Wade have to regrow his bottom half. It's one of the best scenes in the movie, and in Deadpool Volume 2, issues 40 to 44, we find Wade in Her Majesty's Ultra Maximum Security Prison in England. While he's in there, he gets close to a psychiatrist by the name of Ella Whitby. She is head over heels for him. She helps him escape, and once he was out, she even found him again, this time wearing a homemade suit to match her love. And then once Wade is out, he gets a letter from her. And upon closer inspection of Ella's apartment, we find Wade's body parts in her freezer. His body parts were in her freezer. She was collecting parts of his body. Yuck. I mean, all those lost limbs have to go somewhere, so I guess. So Wade decides to throw all these parts in the trash, but his healing factor is so good that it causes these parts to grow back together, resulting in an evil Deadpool. And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be great. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Now let's get right back to the sad list with Deadpool. Number 9. Need a body? Deadpool Volume 1, Issue 61. We see all that remains of the Merc without a mouth. All we have now is his right hand. It's the only part of Wade left, minus the middle finger, of course. Funeral for a Freak is a 4-parter that picks up right after a conflict at the Weapon X facility. His body was literally turned into liquid, so there were no hopes of him healing from this one. But sometimes even a severed hand can still continue the fight. Number 8. Night of the Living Deadpool. Wade's been around the block when it comes to dying. I mean, it's not necessarily new to him, but sometimes the way he goes out is dark, scary, and lonely, even for Wade. We see this to an extreme in Night of the Living Deadpool, written by Cullen Bunn and pencils by Ramon Rosanas. Wade has to go against a horde of zombies all before meeting his ugly fate. For 4 issues straight, Wade's breaking into buildings, trying out new looks, and most importantly, trying to find the source of this worldwide problem, in hopes to maybe discover a solution. Then when a drop of blood hits the ground while Wade's catching up on his beauty sleep, he becomes a zombie himself. Who knew the zombie apocalypse would feel so much like a kick in the jewels, he says. Poor Wade. Now this ends even worse than you'd imagine at this point. The others that Wade did infect turn into an army of Deadpools. Number 7. He got cancer. A kiss, a curse, a cure. Now this story comes right from Deadpool and Death Annual 1998, and it mirrors what happens in the 2016 Deadpool film. We see Wade as a mercenary who gets diagnosed with cancer, so he joins the Canadian Weapon X program in order to attempt to heal it. Now, of course, he ends up getting all these fantastic abilities, but it wasn't easy. Wade had to literally be tortured until his mutation came to life. Once his mutation did develop, he never looked the same. It's actually the reason he didn't approach Vanessa in the film at first. He didn't like the way he appeared. And TJ Miller had a lot to say about that as well. Number 6, Face Off. Now, before I start on this horribly sad Deadpool moment, I mean, sure, his looks weren't the best under that mask to begin with, but would you believe me if I told you that those mutations could even look worse? In Ultimate Spider-Man, Wilson is an anti-mutant who gets hired by the Ganosian government, but of course in Deadpool spirit, it doubles down as a TV event. It's got those Hunger Game vibes for sure. And then when Deadpool is unmasked by Spider-Man, his appearance is even more shocking. And Wade's not overly thrilled about the reveal as well. Even the host, the Stanley Tucci of this show, is like, "Ooh, sorry you had to see that at home, folks. Yuck." Spider-Man even adding insult to injury, saying that his face smells like a KFC dumpster on a hot day. He can dish it out, let's just hope that he can take it. Number 5, Burned Alive. In the 3-parter titled Cruel Summer, beginning with Deadpool 46, we find Wade right after Taskmaster had destroyed his base of operations, the Dead Lounge. So he's in the market. So in order to make the dough to pay for his new luxury hideout, he agrees to work with an undercover police officer. He has to take out these 6 huge mob bosses. That's the deal. Now, this sounds like a piece of cake for Wade, maybe, and it's going fine until he gets betrayed by his informant, Anastasia. Yeah, she teamed up with the police officer, and the next thing you know, Wade is buried alive. And when he tries to light his way to freedom, he gets more than he bargains for, and it quickly turns into a do-it-yourself cremation. All that pain just to get paid. Number 4, Operation Gone Wrong. Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe by Cullen Bunn is a great read. It was released in August 2012, and we pick up with Wade and he's at an all-time low. The X-Men put Wade into the Ravencroft Asylum in attempts to heal his insanity, you know, the trusty doctor being Psycho Man, of course, so things ought to work out. So he brainwashed Wade in hopes to shut down all of those inner voices, those dark voices. It kind of worked, but now there's these new voices that are encouraging him to take out everybody in the Marvel Universe. It's brutal. It opens up with the Fantastic Four facing off with Wade, literally facing off. Reed Richards' face is like, it's all melty like, ugh, gross. Sue had to watch her brother get taken out by the Merc before meeting her own fate. To think that Wade was that close to being healed. Instead, he just ended up becoming way worse. Number 3, X-Men Origins Wolverine. Before getting to the end of this list, I have to mention perhaps one of the saddest things that have ever happened to Deadpool. Before those box office records were shattered, Ryan Reynolds played the Merc without a mouth. Back in 2009, X-Men Origins Wolverine was released. It was actually leaked early, which is already sad for the studio, but also, this was a brutal take on Deadpool. They just didn't do it right at all. Now, in their defense, the film was written during the 2007-2008 writer's strike. So Ryan Reynolds himself had to write the lines for Deadpool. Now, the stage directions would literally just say, Deadpool shows up, talks really fast, makes a lot of jokes. That's it. Now, at the beginning of the movie, it's close to that, almost. Like, Wade is quick with the quips, and the action wasn't that bad. Maybe the sword thing was a little funny, but they made fun of that in Deadpool too, so it's fine. But then he returned later on in the movie for a big showdown, and that's when things were ugly. Him and Wolverine face off, and it's just not it. Ryan Reynolds was barely involved with the character at this point. It was just a stuntman doing flips basically at that point. Nowhere close to the comic accurate representation Reynolds brought to us in 2016. But we got included on this list. Number 2, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Picking up with Deadpool Volume 5, Issue 15, this 5-parter begins with Wade at Weapon X, where the scientist named Butler, who is responsible for Wade's look, has been collecting Wade's organs in hopes that he can solve the cure to cancer in order to save his sister. So he gets the help of Wolverine, they take on the city a bit, it's fun, but they eventually get captured. Now, cut to North Korea, Wolverine and Wade are being held again with Butler, and he's doing these tests. He's creating these Deadpool X-Men creatures, it's gross. And then this is where the sad comes in. Butler tells Wade that Wade has a daughter with a past love, Carmella, and they're also here captured. Yikes. So they end up finding Captain America, who was captured there as well. Now they're the big 3 in town. They're leading all these mutants to storm the camps. They're breaking everybody out. They're saving everyone's family. It's great. They saved a lot of people, but Wade couldn't save Carmella. He couldn't even find his daughter. That's how bad it was. It's heartbreaking, and it's also one of the best Deadpool comics ever. It's a must read. Just bring some tissues. And finally, number 1, X-Men Origins Deadpool. Perhaps an even sadder X-Men origin story. We now look at the origins of Wade Wilson, released in 2010. The concept is quite funny. See, Wade wants to tell his origin story properly before Deadpool, the major motion picture, was released. He even hired a screenwriter to be close while Wade opened up. He opens up about how his looks came to be and those sleepless nights right after he was mutated, adjusting to his new skin. But the saddest part of this origin story is the history Wade and his father had. They had this routine when he was a small boy. His dad would go behind the front door and he would say knock knock, and he'd say, "Who's there?" He'd say, "Cash." "Cash who?" "Cash you." "Ah, I always knew you were a nut. Come here, little rascal." "Ah, good times." But one day he slipped behind the door and he never returned. Even Wade gets choked up talking about it. Also a must read.
Number 10, thought he killed a friend. During New 52 in issue 1 of the 2011 series of The Flash, Barry Allen is on a date when he witnesses a robbery. He manages to chase after the thieves and get his hands on the device that they were stealing, but during the fight, one of them is killed. Later we learn that the thief who died was someone he knew, Manuel Lego, a friend of his from school. Barry Allen suddenly feels sick to his stomach, believing that when he, as the Flash, tossed the culprit through a plate glass window, the impact had killed him. After further investigation, though, he finds that he was not the cause of Manuel's death. Phew. He also learns that the person that was dead might not actually be Manuel, but might be his clone, after he's confronted by another version of Manuel and then a team of Manuel clones. Number 9, he really kills an enemy. I mean, it's easy to understand why Barry does this, especially given everything that we've talked about in regards to Eobard Thawne on part 1 of this list, and all the things that we have yet to mention about all of the awful stuff Zoom has done outside of that. Eobard Thawne is pretty awful, and he's definitely super evil. His whole life mission seems to be about messing up Barry Allen's life, so when Barry Allen finally used force against Zoom when he came to attack his fiancée, Fiona, and snapped his neck, it almost felt justified. But then again, killing people isn't heroic. It's not what we usually expect from our heroes, and it's not what we usually want them to do. After he killed Zoom, Barry was put on trial for the murder, and even his nephew, Wally West, testified against him, believing that his uncle could have done more to try and defeat Thawne without killing him. Barry is deemed guilty for the crime and is forced to leave the present and instead find a new home in a future timeline. And friends, if you are enjoying this list and you want, I don't know, maybe even more sad moments from us from comics, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Wallace West and Iris West versus Red Death. During the events of Dark Knight's Metal, we see Iris West and Wallace West attacked by the Red Death. She, Wallace, and everyone else in Central City have been infected by the Red Death's speed powers and find themselves rapidly aging, being turned into dry, brittle, corpse-like versions of their former selves. The moment is tragic, but fortunately, Barry arrives just in time and attempts to save the two of them. Iris confesses how much she misses him and how sorry she is for killing Eobard Thawne, because that's what happened in this continuity, but just as he grabs them and rushes to save them, the ground below opens up below him and swallows up Barry, and he finds himself confronted by the Batman Who Laughs. Oh no. It's a pretty sweet moment though with him and Iris. Sad and sweet, my favorite. Number 7, Godspeed's death. You wouldn't think the death of a villain would be tragic until you realize just how Godspeed was created and who was really responsible for that. Godspeed was a friend and colleague of Barry Allen's who ended up getting superpowers from basically a Speed Force storm. He was working to avenge the death of his brother, whose killer was never found, even before he received powers. Godspeed, however, not only used his powers to avenge the cold cases of other victims, but also ended up draining all the other newly created speedsters of their speed force, killing them. In the end, he and Barry and Eobard Thawne had to team up and travel back in time. After this, it seemed as though Godspeed might end up redeeming himself, but it was then revealed that Thawne had been the one to murder his brother. He killed Godspeed in front of Barry and did the thing that he always does, claim that he had done it all just to torment Barry Allen. Wow. Number 6, Death of Iris West. Eobard Thawne, as you may have caught on at this point, really loves destroying Barry Allen's life. Like, a lot. And so it shouldn't come too much surprise that he'd eventually turn to Iris West for even more good old tormentin' fun. Eobard Thawne, aka Professor Zoom, was actually also in love with Iris West, and so this time around, it was less about tormenting Barry and more about winning Iris. Although I'm sure the torment was like icing on top of his twisted murder cake for Zoom. Iris refused to be with Zoom, and for that, he killed her, attempting to frame a known convict for it in the process. At least he did so painlessly though, I guess. He phased his hand into her head and then made it solid, and then she was just dead. He tried to make it painless, but still pretty terrible. Fortunately, Iris would return, of course, because time travel shenanigans would allow her to basically be resurrected in a new body that looked completely identical to her old one, but like in the future. How weird, but also nice. Number 5, death of Henry Allen. As though Nora Allen's dying in CW's The Flash wasn't bad enough, we also see Henry Allen die in the show, and so too does Barry. He gets a front row seat, as a matter of fact, and once again, it also happens in his family home. Oh my goodness. In almost the exact same spot as Nora, feels like to me. Professor Zoom, of course, is the one responsible for this. Zoom heartbreakingly only kills Henry Allen after he has been released from prison and has reconnected with his son. The fact that his father's death echoes his mother's so much just makes it even more heartbreaking. It also causes Barry to unleash some internal fury, which we see when he pursues Zoom and potentially considers him killing him for what he's done. Of course, then another version of Zoom comes and kills him, and anyways, timey-wimey stuff. Number 4, Flashpoint. We talked about the Arrowverse version of this on part 1 of the list, but now it's time to dive into the comics version of this event. Flashpoint is set off by the fact that Barry Allen decided to do something kinda selfish and go back in time and save his mom. However, he then realizes just what he has done when he sees what happens to the rest of the world as a result of this change. Bruce Wayne ends up dead instead of his parents, making Thomas Wayne Batman and Martha Wayne the Joker in this new reality, and that's really just scratching the surface of how messed up the state of everything pretty much is in Flashpoint. Barry gets his powers restored so that he can fix all of this and everything that he messed up, and then of course is tearfully forced to say goodbye to his mother again! It's hard enough losing your mom once, but losing her twice when you know that she could in theory live and you saved her before must be impossibly sad. Like, geez, I feel so bad for Nora and Barry, it's so tragic. Number 3, death of Nora West Allen. In the Arrowverse, Nora West Allen is the daughter of Barry Allen and Iris West. She ends up with her parents in the past. Later, she is forced to either give up her life or accept the negative Speed Force as becoming a permanent part of her, making her more like the rage-fueled Thawne. Nora acknowledges that all of this is happening as a result of her own mistakes and messing with the timeline, and of course, rather than give in to the dark side of the negative Speed Force, she chooses to simply let go. Despite the fact that her parents swear that they'll find a way to remove the negative Speed Force from her and really don't want her to let go. Nora knows, however, that this is impossible, and rather than let herself be corrupted by the negative Speed Force, she gives up her life. As Barry and Iris hug her in a tearful embrace, Nora West Allen fades away, allowing herself to be rewritten out of the timeline and wiped from existence. It's actually really sad. I feel like so many of these things in The Flash, when they happen, make me cry so much. Feel like sometimes I just need a good cry, I guess. Number 2, Iris West dies again! Yep, as if the love of his life dying once wasn't bad enough, even after Barry and Iris are reunited in the 30th century, Crisis on Infinite Earths comes a knockin', prepared to mess up everything for the happy couple, and well, just about everybody else besides. In the events leading up to Crisis on Infinite Earths, Barry found his new home threatened. He does his best to save his Earth and Iris, but this time around, he doesn't win the day like he usually does, and instead he fails. As if that wasn't bad enough, this also set him on a course racing towards his own death in what was yet to come. Number 1, Crisis on Infinite Earths. In Crisis on Infinite Earths, the Anti-Monitor threatened to destroy every Earth and basically all of reality and everything, and he ended up trapping Barry Allen, the Flash, so that he could not prevent the Anti-Monitor's dastardly plans. Just as Anti-Monitor was getting ready to destroy the last surviving Earths, Barry managed to escape. He uses his super speed to dismantle the Anti-Monitor's major weapon, his antimatter cannon, but in doing so, Barry finds himself devoured by the Speed Force and seemingly killed. How tragic. Though Barry would return, it wouldn't be for over 20 years, and everyone mourned his sacrifice and his passing. In the end, his sacrifice made it possible for the heroes to rally and defeat Anti-Monitor, saving the universe and providing us with a new continuity.
Number 10, he created Carnage. With Venom, Let There Be Carnage releasing later on this year, we finally get to see Carnage on the big screen with Woody Harrelson set to play the mad Cletus Cassidy. So why not kick this list off with one of Venom's biggest mistakes? Creating Carnage. When Eddie Brock was doing time at Rikers Island, his cellmate was none other than Cletus Cassidy, who was in there for horrible crimes. So when Venom came to break Eddie out of jail and reunite, part of the symbiote was left behind, and it ended up bonding with Cletus Cassidy. That plus the symbiote equals, well, Carnage. Absolutely. And we meet Carnage for the first time in comics with Amazing Spider-Man issue 361. In a list of sad moments in Venom's life, I think creating your archenemy is worth a mention. After all, his name may pop up again on this list, but that's for later. And before we continue on with some sad Venom moments, guys, if you could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up just to boost some morale. It's a sad video, we could use some thumbs up, brighten the mood a little bit. And if you haven't already subscribed, now would be a good time to do so as well. Just a little click, and then we're happy. That's it. It does wonders for the channel. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for your support. Now back to some sad Venom times. Number 9, too many webs. Too little time. It takes time getting used to your superpowers. I mean, to figure out the do's and the don'ts. Look at Scarlet Witch or the Hulk even, for example. Even having years of experience, things can still go south. In the comics, it doesn't take long for Venom to figure out webs are not unlimited. In the fabulous 300th issue of The Amazing Spider-Man, we see Venom's first swing at the spider life. He bonded with Spider-Man first, so when MJ meets the symbiote for the first time, she actually thinks that it's still Peter in his new black suit. He's similar to Spider-Man, only his webbing comes from his own symbiotic material. So when he shoots out the webs, he's really just shooting out himself. And eventually, he starts to run out of himself. He ends up falling to the ground, ending his first conflict with Spider-Man in a rather depressing way. Now, this isn't a video game, Eddie, so webbing is limited this time around. Number 8, clapped by the Hulk. When it comes to taking down the crazy Clintar, you can usually rely on fire to help settle the score, or its other main weakness, sound. Now, at the end of the movie Spider-Man 3, we saw Peter Parker figure this out. It matched the comics a lot with the bell tower, the symbiote being torn off Eddie Brock, all that jazz. But in Peter David's The Incredible Hulk vs. Venom, we see Hulk dish out a thunderous clap, so loud that Venom gets knocked right out. He gets clapped so hard that he throws up, which is pretty wild to me, considering just 4 pages before he took an undercut of a lifetime from the Hulk, yet that sound weakness is just too much to bear. Somebody tell Venom to never see a Slipknot concert ever. The guy wouldn't even make it past the openers. Number 7, snarky Tony Stark. In Iron Man issue 302, readers got to see a venomous blowout. Well, sort of. See, this is the time in the comics where Venom started to switch over to the good side. He started to become a part-time hero. This is after his truce with Spider-Man was made in Amazing Spider-Man 375. So he's going toe-to-toe with Stark now because, well, he doesn't like his company, he doesn't agree with how he runs things, the whole shebang. They're fighting, Stark switches over to ultrasound imaging because, you know, there was goop all over his mask and you couldn't see. But the ultrasound imaging was, of course, harmful to Venom. They just weren't a fan. So as you're reading this, you would think, okay, this is how he stops him. Some cool tech, checks out. Wrong. See, Stark actually roasts Venom so hard that he stops fighting. He insults him. He makes him feel so bad with his words. He straight up shames him. He's like, oh, you want to confront evil? Well, how about you take a good look in the mirror, pal? 6, unfortunate Fortunato. Losing a battle is all part of the fun as well. So Venom got shamed so hard that he backed into a cave. When you're defeated, you gotta come up with a new plan. It's part of the gig. But sometimes when Venom loses these battles with Spider-Man, he doesn't take it very well. Like Angelo Fortunato. Back in 2005, Marvel wanted to reboot Venom, so the new Venom host was Don Fortunato. And in his story, he won the symbiote in an auction. He gave the suit to his son Angelo in attempts to toughen him up. I mean, sure, paintball would have sufficed, but sure, super suit it is. Eddie warned Angelo about the risks of doing this, but Angelo didn't listen. He ignored Eddie and then attacked Spider-Man anyways. He fought him, he ripped out Spider-Man's heart, and then he realized it's not actually Spider-Man. Rather, it was an imposter all along. So you would think that would be the end of it. That's pretty harsh enough. That could probably be a list point by itself. But when the real Spider-Man came in, Angelo didn't stand a chance. He was getting whooped. He was getting whooped so hard that he left. He just ran away from the problem. And maybe Eddie was right. Okay, fair. But Venom wasn't a fan of this idea. The whole running away from a fight thing didn't sit well with him. So he abandoned his host mid-air. No, he didn't order him an Uber. He didn't drop him off at a Burger King. He was like, "Yeet now, bye, see ya." Spider-Man would have saved him, but his gear wasn't working properly after the fight that Angelo had just caused. You played yourself. Number 5, the Savage Six. The Crime Master has been a Spider-Man villain since The Amazing Spider-Man issue 11, and in 2012 he gathered his own team of villains called the Savage Six. It consisted of Death Adder, the Human Fly, Jack-o'-lantern, Megatack, and Toxin. Now, Crime Master forcefully bonded Eddie with the Toxin symbiote, and then the team targeted all those that Venom cared about. And then in the very next issue, they go after Betty Brant, with Jack-o'-lantern first up to bat. Next, the team sets their sights on Betty's family. The Human Fly was actually seconds away from eating Betty's mother. It's horrible. And then in part 4, it's revealed that the Crime Master was actually Betty Brant's brother, and Betty was forced to deal with him the hard way. Poor Eddie, and also poor Betty. Poor Eddie and Betty. This is a lose-lose for both parties involved. Number 4, bonding with Anne Wang. Anne first met Eddie Brock at Empire State University. She made her comic debut back in Amazing Spider-Man 375. She's a wonderful lady. She reflects on how once upon a time, her and Eddie were in love because, well, he was smart, witty, and he had a boyish charm that swept her off her feet. Sounds magical. But we're in a list of sad Venom moments, so it's about to change. Sorry. While they were married, Eddie became a journalist for the Daily Globe. Now this happened while she was a lawyer. After she divorced him, which is fine because sometimes things don't work out, things only got worse for her. She was shot by the villain Sin Eater, so Eddie figured it was a good idea to loan her some of the symbiote stuff, to help heal her. Now it worked, but the only downside is now we have another Venom. It's not that easy. You can't just put some goop on someone, heal them up, and then bring it back without consequences. So now we have another Venom. Now we have She-Venom. Anne ended up taking the lives of 2 men who attacked her, so although the symbiote returned to Eddie, she still has to live with all of those memories during that time. And she was traumatized until the end of her life. She couldn't even leave her own apartment. That's how bad it was. Even for such a short amount of time, Venom can cause quite the stress. Number 3, tortured by Carnage. So remember that Carnage guy that I mentioned at the beginning of this list? Well, in Web of Spider-Man issue 103, which is part of the Maximum Carnage storyline, Cletus Cassidy straight up tortures Venom. He chains him up over top of a fire, which we know doesn't mix too well with symbiotes, and he also shot at him with a sonic gun. So that's 2 weaknesses right there, boom. It's not looking good. Now, it's one thing to be attacked by your greatest enemy, but when they know your weak points because you are the reason they exist, that's a whole new level of pain. It's painful and personal. Carnage is just the worst. Number 2, he was fired. Perhaps one of the most saddest moments is when Eddie and the symbiote first met. And it happened to be on one of the worst days of Eddie's life. He had just been fired by J. Jonah Jameson for making Spider-Man out to look like a thief. So with his journalism career now over, he goes to Our Lady of Saints Church, asks for forgiveness, and while he was there at his arguably lowest moment in life, that's when Venom just had to come along. To think that all this started because of a mistake that Eddie made with his job is just arguably the most sad point of all of them. The hatred for Peter plus the symbiote's hatred for Spider-Man, I mean, this was the world's best timing. A match made in heaven. Or a church, rather. Close enough. And number 1, his childhood. What's a villain without a sad origin story? Before the symbiote even came in contact with Eddie, his sad days were already well upon him. He grew up without a mother. She sadly didn't survive when she had Eddie, and his father, Carl Brock, resented Eddie for this, which is awful. What a terrible way to grow up. Nobody should have to experience that, let alone feel guilt for that afterwards as well. That's horrible. But Eddie was doing great in school. He was actually really trying to earn his father's love growing up. And in order to make friends, Eddie would often find things that were lost. So he would steal things and then return them just to make a friend. That's how bad this guy's life was. Poor Eddie. And then when he was a teenager, his bad luck grew immensely. He took his father's car and snuck out for a night in the town. And when he was on his way home, he accidentally hit his neighbor's son. Now his father ordered him to plead innocence, although Eddie's guilt was at an all-time high. He ended up pleading not guilty, but in doing so, it bankrupted his father and it ruined his reputation at the same time. That on top of Eddie's already horrible childhood, I can't imagine. This is a terrible origin story. No wonder the symbiote consumed him. Poor kid.
Number 10, confronts Joe Chill. Honestly, a moment that really tugged at my heartstrings came from 3 Jokers and Batman's confrontation of Joe Chill there. Batman has confronted Chill more than once in the comics, and usually many of those times involve him losing his temper to some extent and getting swept up in his own mourning. Joe Chill is also usually represented as being unremorseful, swearing he'd do it again if he had the chance, or simply completely ignorant of what he'd done, so hardened of a criminal is he. In 3 Jokers, however, he's painted as a sick, elderly man who has many regrets in life. He learned more about the Waynes during his time in prison and their public work, and he came to regret his actions because of this. The Joker kidnaps Joe Chill, threatening to turn him into the next Joker, but Batman saves him, even though Joe Chill claims he doesn't deserve it. At one point, falling bricks actually threatened to crush Chill, meaning he couldn't become the next Joker, and Batman would actually finally be rid of him if he just let that happen. And yet, Batman chooses to save him anyway. This event shows that Batman has chosen to forgive Chill in a way and move forward with his life. And it's Batman's ability to heal that inspires a tear after knowing how long the death of his parents has loomed over him. What's even crazier in that story is that technically Joker helped Batman to heal just so he could be an even more iconic Batman villain, which is a pretty next level obsession. Number 9, almost wiped his memory. Almost. Batman has gotten amnesia a few times in the comics, in the animated series as well, but he always seems to recover and find his way home. At one point though, he almost decided to permanently sever that connection to his home and his past. He hired someone to impersonate Alfred so they could sign his papers requesting electroshock therapy to help him basically forget his parents' death and his own tragic past. He was committed to this and on the table, but just as they were about to administer the shock, he decided he could not go through with it. Instead, he used his own tragedy to inspire him, to make something grow out of it, becoming the Batman. Honestly, this is like a pretty good moral too when you think about it. And honestly, I'm glad he did, because it's a pretty good moral to take your own tragedy and then repurpose it into something constructive. This little moment in his history is also perfectly told as a part of a narrative where he has to accept a shock of 1,000 volts in order to defeat the Riddler and keep the lights on in Gotham. At first, it seems as though Batman won't survive as a result, flatlining afterward. But fortunately, Alfred shows up to save the day, promising to always be there to patch Batman up. Aww. Later, Bruce confesses to Alfred what he almost went through years before. And friends, before we move on to this next point, just a quick reminder, if you love this list and you want more Batman lists, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, his connection to Joe Chill. Talk about dramatic reveals that really make you revel in Batman's tragic origins. This reveal comes to us from the 60s, where it showed up in Batman issue 208. Here we learned that Bruce's uncle Phillips became his guardian following the death of his parents. Philip, however, traveled quite a bit. He would often leave Bruce in the care of his housekeeper, Mrs. Chilton. Mrs. Chilton helped to raise Bruce and was excited at the opportunity, as she had 2 sons previously, but they were all grown up now. She later looks back on her time with Bruce and is proud of the man he's become. She even figured out that he was really Batman. But what she also reveals is that one of her own 2 sons was named Joe, and that he changed his last name to Chill. A secret, she says, that Bruce must never know. Dun dun dun. Pretty sad that he was raised by the woman who also raised Joe Chill. Number 7, losing to Bane. This was a very epic loss, and one that Batman would never forget. It wasn't just a sad moment for Bruce either, but a sad moment for comic book readers around the world. When Bane broke Batman's back in Nightfall, it put Batman out of commission for all of us. And most people that break their backs don't just bounce back from that. So this setback left some fans wondering if we'd ever see Bruce take up the cowl again. Bruce focused on recovering and would eventually return, with Azrael taking up the mantle for him during his time away from Gotham. But he'd likely come to regret this choice after he saw what Azrael did while wearing the name upon his return. Number 6, death of his fiancée. This one was really tragic because it seemed as though Bruce might finally be learning to loosen up and drop his guard down a little bit. And then this happened. For a while, it seemed as though, against all odds, Batman might actually settle down and even, I dare say, retire, with the return of his old flame, Silver St. Cloud. Silver was like many other potential love interests before her, a socialite, putting her on a pretty close level to Bruce in terms of her everyday life and her status. Silver had originally left Bruce because she learned of his true identity as Batman and basically couldn't deal with it. Riddled with worry for Bruce, she left him and left Gotham. However, years later, she would return to Gotham, and the two fell back in love and decided to pick up where they'd left off. Their newly rediscovered love for one another inspired Bruce to propose, and Silver said yes. Unfortunately, Batman villain Automatopoeia had inserted himself into Batman's life, posing as an ally and a friend, reinventing himself as a new hero who called himself Baphomet. Bruce considered Baphomet to be someone who could potentially help to take his place when he retired. He even brought Baphomet into the Batcave, not knowing that it was actually Automatopoeia in disguise, and introduced him to his fiancée, Silver. It was then that Automatopoeia revealed his true villainous intentions, taking Silver's life. Number 5, Catwoman left him. And at the altar, no less. Oh my goodness. This wasn't just sad for Batman, it was sad for all of us who were pumped about this wedding. Finally, Batman and Catwoman were prepared to tie the knot after years and years of comic book history and romantic history together. This was the event we had been waiting years for as comic book fans. Admittedly, the two have been married before in the comics, but these stories are generally relegated to alternate Earths. or like non-canon stories. This time it would be happening for real in the main continuity. But right before the wedding, Catwoman seemed to get cold feet after Selina had a few discussions and self-doubt was planted in her mind about the wedding, and it became so strong that she just couldn't ignore it. So she left Bruce at the altar with a letter explaining why she did it. Of course, this was all revealed to be a major villainous plot orchestrated in part by Bane. So sadly, no happy ending for Batman or Catwoman. I feel like we're still all waiting for them to get married. We're like, come on, let it happen. Number 4, the return of Jason Todd. What could be sadder than Jason Todd's death and Batman's failure to save him? Why, his return, of course. Jason Todd was one of those characters you expected to stay dead, like Uncle Ben. We never expected to see him return, and yet years later, he did just that. But this Jason Todd was a bit different, and we later learned that he had become a villain going by the name of Red Hood, who blamed everyone, Batman especially, for not being there for him when he needed them the most. Of course, this only twisted the knife in Batman's gut a little more. Losing Jason had already been one of the hardest moments of his life, and one that he had already blamed himself for many times over. So it was pretty heartbreaking to see Jason come back and be so, like, I don't know, vindictive, even though I know Jason Todd has kind of always been that way. Number 3, death of Damian Wayne. Batman has lost a lot of Robins over the years, and a lot of adopted sons, but Damian Wayne was his natural heir. Well, I mean, natural-ish. As natural as it gets, in my opinion, until we get a Helena Wayne in the main continuity. Damian was the son of Bruce Wayne and Talia al Ghul. He was raised by Talia and the League of Assassins without Batman really even knowing of his existence, until years later when Talia dropped him off on Bruce's doorstep, declaring Damian his son. Surprise! Initially, the two did not get along very well. Damian was stubborn in his ways and insisted on killing as he'd been trained to do his whole life. But eventually, he came around and began to see the value of his father's approach to fighting crime, respecting it, and even admiring it. Just as their relationship begins to shift, though, Damian is killed by the Heretic, a death that Batman can't even bring himself to avenge when he realizes that the Heretic is actually Damian's clone. Following Damian's death, we also got Volume 2 of Batman's Issue 18, an issue that focuses on the mourning of Damian's passing and is completely wordless throughout its sorrow-filled pages. Number 2, death of Thomas and Martha Wayne. One of the worst things to have happened to Bruce Wayne would have to be the death of his parents. He was only a child when this happened, and he happened to be with them that fateful night, even witnessing their gruesome murder. While it has been implied recently in the comics that Bruce sought out therapy to actually deal with this traumatic event, it is also what inspired him to fight back against crime as Batman, providing a kind of different type of therapy. The interesting thing is that while this is likely what would come up for Bruce if you asked him about the saddest or tragic moments of his life, without this event, he likely wouldn't be the hero that he is today. In fact, I suspect that we would have not gotten a Batman in the world if not for this grisly murder and most devastating moment. Number 1, death of Alfred. What could possibly be sadder than the death of young Bruce's parents? Well, how about the death of adult Bruce's father figure, butler, and confidant, Alfred? I don't think it gets much sadder than this. While the death of Batman's parents is tragic, Alfred was there to help pick up the pieces and in essence help to raise the boy before his parents passed, and of course, thereafter. He was probably one of the closest people to Batman and was more apparent to Bruce in the end than even his parents were able to be, because, you know, they've been dead for most of his life. Alfred was shockingly killed by Bane after he'd kidnapped him when Damian Wayne didn't take his threat seriously and set out to save Alfred. It was because of his pursuit of Bane that Alfred was killed by the villain, and this was all a part of Bane's plan to break Batman again, but this time focusing more on breaking him mentally and psychologically.
Kicking off the list with number 10, What If? The Juggernaut. Okay, to start this sad list, we got What If starring the Juggernaut. It was released in 1997, written by George Gonzalez, and we kick off in a world where Sentinels have already wiped out all superheroes. Great start. Plus, there's this toxic gas that's filling up the atmosphere, which will kill all of life. So things are beginning grim right off the bat, okay. And all that's left now at this point is just the Juggernaut. Now he's hunting down these Sentinels. He wants to die, but his own invulnerability won't let that happen. Kind of like Hulk the End, just a sad, strong man in a world full of rubble. So he sees Iron Man's helmet, he sees Cyclops' cracked visor. He's just walking down horrible memory lane. Then he meets a couple of surviving mutants, and they're not in good condition mentally. I mean, They're actually blaming Juggernaut for killing the X-Men, and it all ends with Juggernaut knowing he's going to be the last living being on the planet and that it's his own damn fault. And before we go on to number 9 for our next sad what if story, if you guys could go ahead and please like this video, or else we'll be on a what if you didn't like the video, and then it's going to be a sad video on all the alternate futures where you didn't like our videos. So please go ahead and do that, because that would be great. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Now back to the list. Number 9. What if Cable had destroyed the X-Men? Well, this one just sounds bad right off the hop. So after Professor X came back to Earth, the team was never going to be the same again. At this X-Men meeting, Xavier gets in a fight with Cable, and then all of a sudden it turns into Cable and his crew versus everybody, and it was just this big brawl. Now they escape, but later on, Cable kills Xavier, Jean, and Scott with a siren bomb. So now everybody's deciding on what to do with this guy. Wolverine's team wanted to kill him, and Storm's team wanted to bring him in. Both are pretty bad. So the Avengers have to step in and fight their battles while they're all working their own stuff out over there. So the Avengers are like, just do your thing, we're gonna go fight your bad guys, just wrap it up. But eventually Cable and his team is killed by Wolverine's team. Number 8, what if Wolverine battled Conan the Barbarian? Written by Glenn Herdling and released in 1990, what if Wolverine had battled Conan the Barbarian? So basically Conan and Wolverine switch dimensions. So we have Wolverine causing trouble in the Hyborian Age alongside Red Sonja, and Conan smashes Cyclops in the head with a rock, which causes the full fury of the Phoenix Force to be unleashed. So now this has caused a ripple effect, so the psychic rapport was shattered, and without Wolverine to hurl Colossus at her, there's nothing that prevents Jean Grey from transforming into her dark persona before she can destroy herself, resulting in the destruction of the entire universe. So just like that, Cyclops gets hit with a rock and then it all goes to shit. So yeah, crossovers are for sure fun, but you gotta look at the possible ways it could go poorly as well. Wolverine versus Conan the Barbarian is definitely one of those ways. Number 7, what if Professor X had become the Juggernaut? In this reality, Professor X is the one who becomes Juggernaut and gets buried. Now this causes him to go down a completely different path when it comes down to the X-Men, because after this, he never ended up creating the X-Men because he was stuck. So now the Fantastic Four wants to defeat Magneto instead. So Professor X, he's still listening. He's using his mind powers. He's knowing what's going on out there. He's kind of getting pissed that he's not able to go out and help. So he digs his way out, and his telepathy powers are now stronger than ever with his new Juggernaut super strength. So he takes over the country with his own X-Men posse to enforce these anti-human laws. So Cyclops even sided with Magneto at this point because he could block Xavier's telepathy. So they're battling it out on Asteroid M, and Cyclops is trying to remind Xavier about his original dream, you know, with humans and mutants living together in harmony. And before he could really consider it, the ground beneath him exploded and he got launched into space, probably forever, and man, that's gotta be boring. Imagine not dying in space. That sounds like an absolute nightmare. This should be number 1 maybe, I don't know. Number 6, what if the Hulk died and Kyra lived? Written by Greg Pak, released in 2007. Okay, so we start with the Hulk saving Kyra by throwing her out of the way of the explosion instead of the ship. So now the Hulk had died along with Crown City. And Kyra, she's pretty pissed, right? She takes all the old power from the planet and gets ready with her sights set on Earth. She's coming. First stop, of course, being the moon, where she defeats Black Bolt and then implants a obedience disc on him. So when Strange and Sentry come to the rescue, she makes Black Bolt use his sonic scream, which of course results in both of them dying. She's killing everybody fast, okay? So Heroime comes to stop her and says that basically if you kill everybody on Earth, nobody can honor your dead husband. So she says, fine, but you're gonna wish you were dead instead. And then it cuts to 21 years later, and she's made all the remaining heroes build this massive Hulk statue. And when it's finally done, she walks onto the hand of the statue and then turns into stone, joining him. The end. Yeah, how sad is that? I mean, I feel like it wouldn't take those guys 21 years to build a statue. I mean, if they're getting paid by the hour, sure, then by all means, go for it. Number 5, what if the Avengers had never been? Written by Jim Shooter and Gil Kane, released in 1977. This was actually the first what if issue with a major death. So of course it has to be on the list somewhere. So we start off with the Hulk. Now this time he's not hitting, he's actually quitting. Now this caused the Avengers to dismantle. So Stark asked Rick Jones to find the Hulk, Thor went back to Asgard, and Jan and Hank went back to living as normal people. So Rick finds him, but he's now being held hostage from the Green Giant. So Stark swoops in and saves him, and they head back to the Avengers mansion. So Namor and the Hulk call out the Avengers, or rather what's left of them. So Iron Man makes a few iron suits for the others, and the suits, I mean, they aren't Tony Stark. They can't control these things nearly as well as he can. Unless you're in the movie Iron Man 3, then everyone can do that all of a sudden. So they stay in retirement. They're like, screw that, I don't want any part of that. So he's like, whatever. He powers up his own suit a little bit too much, and then he heads to the battle alone. He fights a bit, and then right when he's about to be ended, the rest show up. Jan, Hank, and Rick are back. Nice. So Tony is done at this point. His armor is weak, he's close to being finished off, so he uses his remaining power to regenerate Hank's armor. So the Hulk snaps out of it and goes after Namor, while the rest of our heroes mourn over a fallen Tony Stark, who sacrificed himself to save his team. Similar vibes to Endgame. A lot of feels in that one. Okay, a lot of feels. A good number 5 feels train. Number 4, what if somebody else besides Spider-Man had been bitten by the radioactive spider? Written by Don Glutt, released in 1977, we get to see a dream play out. Look, we've all probably wanted to be Spider-Man at one point or another. Of course, I mean, doing backflips and swinging downtown, that's gotta be the vibe. But of course, when it comes to stopping criminals and taking out supervillains, it's probably pretty stressful. So in this what if, we get to see this idea play out. We see other characters have a crack at the life of the web slinger, starting with Flash Thompson. And let's just say it's a lot harder than it looks. So we got Flash Thompson. Now after he gets bit, he teaches a bad driver a lesson, and he feels pretty good with his new given abilities, and he plays it out a bit. So he decides to take a crack at professional wrestling, maybe make some cash, which is a pretty good idea. I mean, you're a superhero, so you can definitely win most, if not all, fights. But he accidentally kills the guy. Sorry, oops. Then Betty Brant is now up with the powers. Okay, so let's see how she would do in the life. Well, her costume for starters is pretty badass. But when she runs out of web fluid while making TikToks, a thief runs by and gets away. And that thief, of course, being the one to take Uncle Ben's life. So far, so bad. Now finally, we have our third contender with the powers. John Jameson. While his outfit was also pretty good, he couldn't do the job like Peter, and he actually died while trying to prevent a space shuttle from crashing. I guess it's not as easy as it looks. I mean, to be fair, if something actually happened and it had webs, I really wouldn't know what to do. I would do a backflip and be like, is it fixed? No? It was cool though. Number 3. What if the Punisher killed Daredevil? We all know the Punisher as the guy who usually brutally kills criminals. See, with superheroes, those guys he likes to hit with a tranquilizer. But in this what if, we see Daredevil get hit with one of those tranq darts and fall off a building. So while Kingpin prepared for his next step now that he's out of the way, Spider-Man stepped in to deliver some justice on Frank Castle. So he finds the Punisher, and Punisher has no tranq darts left. So he shoots Spider-Man in the shoulder. It's messy, but not fatal, he says. He should survive unless he exerts himself, which he does. And his identity is then revealed. Then it cuts to Aunt May's house, and she grabs a paper, reads the shocking headline, and then the house explodes from a missile launched from the Silvermane City. Boom, house gone. And then after a little while, Peter shows up in a hospital gown, ready to get some revenge on Frank. Peter does pretty well in the fight, so well he's actually just moments away from throwing the Punisher off of a building to his death. But the Punisher stalls and says he has info about his Aunt May, and this slows Peter down for just a split second, allowing for the Punisher to unload on Peter. God, imagine if they introduced Frank Castle in the MCU and then they immediately did something like this. Number 2, what if Kraven the Hunter had killed Spider-Man? Released in 1990, written by Richard Howell. Yeah, judging by this title alone, this one's a little sad. I figured we're already on the Spider-Man misfortune train, so I had to throw this one in next, you know? What if Kraven had killed Spider-Man? Okay, so we start with Pete patrolling the streets when he's suddenly trapped by Kraven in a net, and just like that, he unloads, killing Peter Parker. And of course, he eats a bunch of spiders and suits up himself to celebrate. Yeah, you eat a bunch of spiders, now you're Spider-Man. That's how it works. I think a human eats like, what, 7 spiders in a year when they're sleeping? So we have like, what, 7,000 to go? So now he's Spider-Man, just like that, cool. Meanwhile, MJ is like, where on earth is that Peter Parker guy? And then MJ is approached by a couple of thugs, and then in comes Spider-Man to save her. Only it's Kraven, but she doesn't know that. But she can tell something's up because Spider-Man doesn't recognize her, and he's way more brutal with taking out these thugs. So Cap, Daredevil, and Human Torch jump in to see what's up with the wall crawler. They did a decent job of wearing down the beast, but he needed more power. He ate a bunch of spiders earlier, so now it's only fair if he tries to eat Spider-Man's dead body, right? Comics are weird. So MJ tells Cap and the gang that Spider-Man is actually Peter Parker, and that the Spider-Man is indeed not the same. And then Aunt May goes into denial hearing about the news. She's messed up now for life. And the media isn't happy with the tension between supers and the public. The story ends with MJ standing at Peter's funeral, wondering how things could have been. God, Peter just can't catch a break, eh? Oh my God. And finally, number 1, the saddest of them all, what if Wolverine father. Written by Rob Williams, released in 2011, we start off with Wolverine taking out the Winter Soldier. And we see a world with Wolverine and Daken if they had spent their life growing together as father and son. So now we get to see what it would have been like if Logan was there for them the whole time. Now in this reality, they're named John. This life, however, was filled with repression and lies and led to John leaving his home and rising up as Daken, becoming the leader of the Japanese underworld. So Wolverine tried to save him, but because of the way he was raised with this version of Logan, he looked at him like a monster. He viewed himself as a monster too. "This is the Muramasa blade, John," says Logan as he stabs him. "Healing factors don't work on it." The issue ends with the boy dying beside his father, and Logan uses the same blade on himself. And that's the end. That's the end of the comic. Everyone dies, everyone's sad. That's what ifs for you, right there.